What if I were to tell you that rose wasn't just a pretty garden flower, but it was a teacher that remembers what the world has forgotten about the sacred feminine?
Hey there, I am Jessa. I am a South American trained shaman. I have been working with Amazon plant medicine and Andean spiritual cosmology for nearly a decade. I'm also a Tantra coach, an alchemist, a channel, and an all around cosmic witch. So let's talk about it.
When I'm talking about Rose as a teacher, what I'm referring to is using Rose in Dieta. And if you're unfamiliar with the concept of Dieta and what it is, there is another video that I will link below so that you can get up to speed. Last year, I was invited to a women's circle in Arin in the Sacred Valley of Peru. At this women's circle, I was introduced to a woman named Corey. Corey is of Incan lineage and has done a lot of pilgrimages and deep studies into her ancestral lands here in the Andes. One of the things that we did during this women's circle was Corey had harvested and gathered a lot of plants for us to connect with. And she demonstrated the proper way to ask permission and to introduce yourself to the plant and also to give gratitude when you were starting to work with some of the plants. And Corey had gone around the circle with these plants that she had harvested and collected, and she offered a single plant into our hands, each one of us. The plant that she put into my hands during this circle was the Hampe rosa. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. The word Hampe is a Quechua word, and what it means is it means teacher. So the Hampe rosa is a specific rose that grows here wildly in the Sacred Valley of Peru. You see it everywhere, and this rose blooms throughout the year, and it is absolutely divine. It is a very small bud, very, very fragrant, and had a lot to share with me. So, what came up for me when I first connected with this rose that was sitting in my hand was this vision, and it was a vision of the DNA spiral circling upward. And there was one branch of the DNA that was much more lit up and much stronger. And what I understood in this moment was that this plant, this flower, would connect us to the feminine lineage that runs in our DNA, that runs through our ancestral lineage, that runs through our family system. So the rose also explained that when we connect with her, it is one way to call in that energy in order to connect our prayers upward into the cosmos. And these could be the prayers that your grandmothers had, that your mothers had, that you carry. One of the other things that this rose told me that day was it ignited my womb, where I could really feel my womb space and I could see this fire burning there. And what the rose does is it connects that deepest desire, that passion that is alive within our womb space, and accelerates it into our heart so that our prayers and our dreams and our hopes, our passions are alive and awakened in our heart. What is it that exists inside of your womb? Is it a freedom that your heart longs for? Is it a connection with someone else? Is it a passion? Is it partnership? Is it a drive that is just burning you or inspiring you to make a difference in this world? So the rose will directly connect your womb space to your heart space so that we become more integrated and more aware and responsive to what our heart is asking of us. And the third piece of information that I received that day was that when we smell the rose, we are opening ourselves up. So anytime that we smell something, we are opening ourselves up to become the receiving force for the cosmos, for spirit. So spirit lives through our senses, but when we smell the rose in particular, it opens us up to receive information back, answers to our prayers, opening our intuition, opening our insights. And it directly connects with that which is in the lineage of our matriarchy within our lifetime and past lifetimes. After receiving this information from this single rosebud that was sitting in the palms of my hand that day, I knew right then and there that I had to do a dieta with this rose. I wanted to learn more. This Hampe Rosa, this teacher rose, had something that it wanted to show me, and I was game. Once I had decided to do this dieta with a rose, I tapped into my meditation in the morning to ask how many roses. And the answer I got was 25. So it was going to be 5 roses for 5 days. And I was to begin the Dieta on the fifth day of the second month in the year 2025. So there was a lot of twos and a lot of fives going on here. I did eventually recognize the pattern of the twos and fives, but that is information for another video. Just know at this time that I did 5 roses for 5 days starting on February 5th of 2025. The first step to completing this dieta was to actually harvest the plants, right? I had to have the plants in order to drink them. And luckily, where I was living at that time, there was a whole lot of Hampi rosas growing up and down the line of the river along the road. And I would go out and collect these roses every day. Because we were deep in the rainy season here in the Sacred Valley, there was a lot of moisture hitting these blooms every day. And so they would come in a bud form and they would get wet, and then the intensity of the sun would dry out the outer casing on the rose so they never fully bloomed. And I was looking for fully bloomed roses for this dieta. I began the process of harvesting these roses by first asking permission of the plants to take the blossoms, to take the blooms. The second thing I would do after I harvested the roses is I would offer tobacco to the plant with ayni, which is the word for thank you very much. Ayni, it's a Quechua word for thank you. There were 3 particular plants that I was gathering the roses from. One of the days I had gone out there, I had asked permission from each of the plants to harvest the roses. Well, 2 of the plants had given me a very strong yes. One of the plants gave me a no, and the information I received from this plant was that no, I like my blooms. So I decided not to obviously take roses from that bush. So each day I would go out and I would harvest the open blooms, and there was so many of these crusted shut buds on each of the plants, but I kept leaving those alone. One day after a very heavy rain, I went out and there was only one open bloom, and this bloom happened to be on the plant that had initially given me the no. And me thinking, oh, it's several days later, maybe I'll get a different answer because it's a different day. I asked the plant again, and the response I got that day was, if you must. And I looked around, not seeing any other open blooms. I was like, well, I guess I must. And I took the blossom, put it in my basket, and returned home. That night, when I was laying down to go to sleep, I instinctually knew that there was something off, but I was laying down to go to sleep and I felt this movement on the side of my head. And there's a lot of things that exist down here in Peru that aren't always the most friendly. So I immediately jumped up, ran into my bathroom, shook myself off, shook out my sheets, checked my room, made sure there was nothing living in there with me, and went back to bed. The next morning, when I got up, I went into my bathroom, and the first thing I saw right in the place where I had brushed myself off the night before was a very, very large scorpion. And it was posed, claws out, tails up. The moment that I looked at the scorpion, the image of that rose on that plant and me reaching out to pluck it was the first thing that came to my mind. And I knew right then and there that this was going to be a very powerful dieta. And then that was indeed the very first lesson that I was to learn from the Hampe Rosa. That day, I returned back to that plant with an offering and an apology, and would give it honor every time that I walked past it from that moment forward. And I returned to the other 2 bushes. And what I discovered on those plants is that the blossoms that were crusted closed, if I picked them, the outer crust would shed off, and inside was the most fragrant and beautiful, perfectly preserved essence of the rose. So, this is what I began using for the dieta. So, this particular dieta I was actually doing completely on my own. Um, don't recommend this to anybody unless you're a very advanced practitioner with dieta, as an advanced practitioner with the medicine. Rose itself cleans your liver. And anybody that's done a liver detox, you will understand that when you're going through a liver detox, your body becomes very weak. You become very tired. So I was really struggling a lot during these 5 days with preparing my own food. And I was also struggling with just getting myself up to go to the bathroom. And I did have a couple friends that would check on me periodically just to make sure that I was alive and okay. I will say this though, that out of all of the plants that I've worked with, all of the dietas that I've done, this was by far the most physically strenuous. In the last few years, I've heard more and more information about people doing long distance dietas with teachers. And I've heard of a lot of people doing this diet on their own, usually without the ayahuasca portion of it. It is not a dieta that I would recommend doing unsupervised or unassisted. So, for this particular dieta, because it was such a short dieta, I decided to do two ayahuasca ceremonies. So, I would do a solo sit to open the dieta as I started to drink the rose, and then I would do a ayahuasca sit solo to close the dieta once I had finished the regimen with the rose. What I was doing each day is I was drinking a liter of the rose tea. So I would take the 5 roses, I would brew it into a concentrated liter, drink that throughout the day, and just listen. What I was finding during these days of drinking the tea alone and really being too weak to do much else was a lot of rest. Um, there was just a lot of information about taking care of my body, really resting, really leaning into what was true each and every day. So that was the second big lesson that I received from Rose. And the really deep teachings really started to come during that last ceremony that I had with Rose. And I will say that out of all of the medicine that I have had, all of the ceremonies I've led, I have not experienced that deep of a cleansing or that much purging in a really long time. Not since the early days when I was working a lot with Yopo and ceremony. And it was an absolute volcano of love. So, what did I learn from Rose? What I learned from Rose is that there are two aspects of Rose, there are the thorns and there are the flowers. These are the two power sources or teaching points of the rose. We have the bloom, which represents truth, and we have the thorns, which represent protection. So, the first layer of this, the first thing that the medicine revealed to me while I was in this process with the rose was Medusa at your back. And this is the aspect of the thorns. So the thorns are there to protect us. And if you're unfamiliar with some of the legends or histories or stories of Medusa, I'm going to share a little bit about the way that I connected to Medusa inside of this with the rose. So, Medusa at your back is a way to guard your truth, to guard the truth that you come to understand or you come to know within the sacred feminine. So, Medusa was initially a very beautiful maiden. Medusa was a woman who served as a priestess in Athena's temple. Medusa was assaulted within the temple of Athena. She was assaulted by Poseidon. And Poseidon came into the temple and forced himself on her within the temple compound. Athena was enraged. She was absolutely enraged by the desecration of her temple. And instead of punishing Poseidon for the assault or the attack, she punished Medusa. She transformed Medusa's beautiful locks, her beautiful hair, into snakes. And she gave her a face that was so hideous that her gaze itself could turn anyone to stone. Anyone that looked upon her would be turned to stone. So, aside from the myth aspect of this, one of the biggest lessons that I got from Rose was to honor the sisters. And I think the Medusa's story speaks a lot to the sister wound. It really speaks to Athena's expectations of holding the values of the temple. And yes, that is very important to hold the values of the temple. But when the temple was defiled, instead of looking at the assault or the one that was the aggressor, it was the consecration of the intimacy within the temple that was enraging to Athena. So the sister was punished. What ultimately happened to Medusa was that she met her demise. The hero Perseus was sent to kill Medusa, and using divine assistance and using the reflective shield from Athena herself to avoid looking directly at her gaze, he was able to behead her. The curse placed on Medusa was so incredibly powerful that her head became a very powerful trophy. So even after she was killed, Medusa's head retained a power in to turn people to stone. And Perseus used the head as a weapon and later gave it to Athena, who incorporated it into her shield or her sandals as a symbol of protection. So her story has been interpreted in many, many ways, but it oftentimes symbolizes themes of beauty, of punishment, and of the injustices faced by victims of abuse. And while I was going through the Rose Dieta and this theme of Medusa came up, I did not know the mythology or the full stories of Medusa. The second lesson that the rose had for me during this sit was that of the bloom or the blossom, that which opens. And the blossom itself represents the truth, that it represents the truth that is within us, that point of divinity inside of our own system, that 0 point, the axis mundi. There's a lot of different terminologies that's used for this point of truth, this point of power within us. And so the thorns are there to guard and protect the truth. The example that was used by the medicine during this particular sit was that of Mary Magdalene. And I know she has gained a lot of attention and a lot of popularity these days. But there is something about Mary Magdalene and how she is being used oftentimes as a direct reflection of the health of the sacred feminine. I'm going to explain a little bit here about what I mean. Mary Magdalene has carried many, many different incarnations through her reputation throughout the years. It is now being understood that Mary Magdalene was actually a teacher and a companion of the Christ. Mary Magdalene has been called a prostitute. She has been defiled. She has been thrown under the bus, so to speak. But her reputation and where she stands in the world and in her understanding within the world is a direct reflection of the health of this system of the sacred feminine. And I will go one step farther and say that the health of the sacred feminine is directly related to the health of the relation of sisters within this realm. So I would say that the first lesson of the rose was to honor what is there. Trust that what you need will be provided. Trust what you need will be provided when you ask. Take things in gratitude, honor that which is given, and respect it when nature says no. The second lesson is to rest. Honor your body, honor your truth, keep yourself clean, take care of yourself. The third lesson is that there are forces beyond ourselves that are here to protect us, to honor that exists inside of the sisters, to exist inside of you. You are part of the sacred feminine. And the final lesson is that your truth is real. That dedication, that devotion, that PowerPoint of light, and that you are protected carrying that through this world. The last thing that I'm going to say here is that, myths are here to teach us. The truth has always been passed down through stories, it has always been passed down through myths. So look deeper, dive deeper into what you believe, what you hear. The truth is there. So, what myth have you found that has guided you to the truth within? I would love to know. Hey, so if this resonated, visit my website at jessafrymeyer.com to explore upcoming courses, free offerings, and don't forget to click the buttons. New videos on spiritual leadership, desire alchemy, and embodied transformation every week. See you next time.